Welcome to Rebuilding the Republic, Conversations about America's Future, here at the New York State Writers Institute at the University at Albany. I'm Mark Koplik, Assistant Director. Today's conversation is a partnership with our friends in UAlbany's Department of Latin American, Caribbean, and U.S. Latino Studies. We're thrilled to be here with Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, author of The Undocumented Americans, a 2020 National Book Award finalist, and a rich exploration of the personal experiences of individual undocumented immigrants. You can read more about her and the book here on this page. You can also purchase a copy of The Undocumented Americans via a link to an independent bookstore here on this screen. With us today to lead the conversation is Eric Macias, a Ph.D. candidate in the Latin American, Caribbean, and U.S. Latino Studies Department at UAlbany, and a recent fellow of the Immigration Initiative at Harvard University. His dissertation research focuses on undocumented youth who have been pushed out of school and their negotiation of belonging and inclusion. Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity. And Karla, thanks for being part of this and allowing me to chat about your book. Karla is a writer of the amazing Undocumented Americans that everybody watching should get if they haven't gotten it yet. Karla, I think I can find more about you online, I'm sure, and give you a broader introduction. But I'd rather kind of do that through the book because you do such a good job about narrating yourself in it. So I want to dive in and talk about your book. And you mentioned some of this, the background of the book in the introduction. But for those that maybe have not read the book yet, can you tell us about the idea of the book, where it comes from? I know that you are a doctoral candidate. Is it related to your research at all? Is there parallels there? Yeah.
I studied American Studies during my graduate education at Yale, and I suppose I focused on migration, and I guess I didn't really have a specialization, but I did a lot of work on migration studies and, Latinx history and Latinx literature and ethnography and theories of representation. That definitely informed my work. And this was originally going to be my dissertation. So I wouldn't say that it was directly informed by academia, and in no way does it have any academic language or, is in dialogue with any academics, but it is certainly informed by the hundreds of books that I read in school.
Yeah, you bring something that I read, right? Like that in the book, that it's very accessible but critical and very nuanced and beautifully written. So very different than from a very jargon-loaded immigration book, right? How did you, when you wrote it like that, kind of very nuanced, did you have that in mind? What audience did you have in mind when you were writing this book?
It changed, and it changed because of good editing. I initially had in mind the audience that, in my mind, usually buys books that are by immigrants and about immigrant stories, which are white women who are looking to be inspired, especially by someone like me who, grows up in poverty, grows up in the hood, and then goes to Harvard and Yale and makes it, right? And I thought that those were the people who would want to read my book, and that made me angry. I also knew that regardless of the way that I positioned myself or spoke about or what the reality of my influences were, that I was going to be packaged as a dreamer, and that my credential, my chief credential, was going to be that I was one of the first undocumented students to graduate from Harvard. Even though I've been writing professionally since I was 15 years old. And so that did happen, and I understand why it happened, and I don't blame marketing for it, because this is an industry and we are trying to sell books, and this is how people are legible. We need comps. But what I needed was my editor, Chris Jackson, to tell me that at some point he saw that I was writing out of a place of anger. I'm someone who likes to do performance art, and I was sort of trolling my readers sometimes because I was not writing for them. And sorry, I have to text my partner because I need the charger. And he said, you really have to think about who you're writing for, because you're not writing for who you think you're writing for. And he was absolutely right. And that's when I started to think, at the time, it was the first few days of the Trump administration. And I was carrying around James Baldwin as sort of a talisman. And I wanted to do that for young children of immigrants, whatever their status. And so that was, another inspiration, which was like, how do I write a book that is just truly for a readership of children of immigrants?
So your book has obviously a political tone to it, meshed with the prose. Did you initially have that in mind of writing kind of? To me, it was obviously a political book. Did you have that in mind when you initially started writing this book, or when you had this idea about this book, or was it kind of a conversation with editing with Chris Jackson that kind of ended up as this package?
Obviously, it's a political book in that I'm, was an undocumented immigrant writing about undocumented people and making radical choices, regarding representation, regarding form, regarding how I use sources, regarding ethics. But I didn't set out to write a political book. I fought really hard for the book to just be treated as literature. And I know that that's a debate that graduate students are going to have forever about, whether a book can just be considered literature, whether, if it's political, whether, I understand that that's a debate that doesn't have to be resolved, because otherwise there would be no graduate programs. But I'm often invited onto TV shows to be like a talking head, and I don't have anything interesting to contribute in terms of like thoughts on immigration policy. Like I believe all of the things that I think good, rational people who love and have family members who are undocumented immigrants and who are smart and empathic probably believe in. I'm not like a super genius in that regard. I'm just an artist. And so my goals are mostly representational. Like, I had seen a lot of laziness and caricature in the writing about immigrants, and I thought I could do a better job.
Yeah, and I think that comes out really well. And I like that you say that, especially with labor, right? I think so much of immigration literature is kind of focuses so much about the portability and, their labor, essentially what they're here for, right? which have a question about that for later, but I want you to tell us a little bit about the title and the cover of the book. It's really interesting, and I paused, and after I read it, I paused and thought about the article, the title, for a while, and I actually talked to my partner about it, and I kind of was puzzled by it. So I want to hear your thought about it, where it came from, and how you got there. Um, but yeah, for us to understand a little bit more.
The cover art.
Yeah, the cover art and the title.
Okay, I'll show you the cover art. Well, my other options were Chris Jackson. I feel deserves to be called out on this. He wanted like little footsteps traveling the country, and they were supposed to represent my little feet. So what cover would you have chosen? Okay, so that's my first thing. I appreciate this cover. You know, if I had a choice for a cover, it would have been like a glamorous picture of myself. This is supposed to, I mean, here I am being, you know, another doing visual, I'm doing visual material culture. This is a flower showing that we blossom even in you know, unwelcoming circumstances. I don't really care about the flower. I liked that the flowers had like a tattoo vibe. I'm pretty heavily tattooed, and it also has the aesthetic of like the Chicano, like LA West, you know, West Coast prison style tattoos that, you know, originated in the West Coast, and I really liked that. But what was important to me was for there to not be like a literal interpretation of undocumented, like someone like brainstorming, being like undocumented, documented, papeles, papers, you know, and thinking like that's some kind of like genius idea. And it's like, no, that's like a high 11-year-old. And it's like, so what it is, it's like, these are papers. And it's like, when you're on the way to legalization, or if you're, you know, anywhere along this spectrum of legalization, like what's important to me in this cover is that there are like blood stains around it. Because ever since I had DACA, and then when I had like a temporary green card or work permit, whatever, any series of any of those fucking papers, I always felt guilty. I always felt like I was leaving people behind. I've never understood the people who've been like, well, I did it the right way. Like I got the visa, you know, you crossed the border, I came here on the plane, you know, like I waited for my visa. I got it in the visa lottery. I did it in the amnesty, you know, like, fuck you. Like, it's all, it all has blood on it, because, you know, immigration law has always been a matter of exclusion. And the people who are excluded historically have been queers, have been mentally ill people, have been people with HIV/AIDS, have been Black people, have been undesirables for a number of reasons. I think for a number of other reasons, would be considered someone who, at another point in history, would not be wanted in the United States. And, you know, I remember having written so much about my mental illnesses. When I was applying for my green card, I was like, will this hurt me? You know, will they retaliate against me because I would not make a good citizen, given, even though I've been so productive, I've been like, you know, like I'm such a pageant girl, like, I'm mentally ill, you know? because we have my partner studies like mental hygiene, and the way that it has been interpreted to historically to exclude immigrants from this country. And so it was very important to me for there to be blood on this cover, because I wanted nobody who touched it to not have had contact with it.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for drawing a better picture verbally than the book. I mean, than the cover. It's a beautiful cover, but the way that you described it is so powerful. And the style inside of it is also so powerful. The style that you wrote the book in, it's not, I'm not a literary person, but it's not a novel, it's not an ethnography, it's not a...
What's your discipline?
I'm Latinx studies,
Okay.
and I'm an ethnographer, so I read that the thick description, that bringing so much events and so many experiences to life that you have in this book, but it's kind of a combination of all of these things, and you do it so well. Why did you choose to write it like that? Did it come out naturally that way, or was it kind of...
I am always interested in hearing people describe my voice. So tell me what you think my voice sounds like.
I mean, it's there were many moments that I thought it was, like I said, I read it like a novel. There were moments that I read so much like an autoethnography or memoir. So that kind of combination, and it just kept me more engaged than anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
It kept me intrigued. It kept me right, where is she going? And then the way that you described the people in it, right? You call them characters, right? So
yeah,
it's a unique way that you bring them to life and you humanize them. So it's very well written. It's amazing. So I wonder, did she set out to write it like this intentionally? Why did she do that? And then at the same time, you put yourself in your family's narrative. You interconnected with these other kind of stories, right? So that's why maybe in autoethnography, I was super intrigued the way that you wrote it, and I liked it a lot. But why did you choose that approach? Did it come out naturally, or what was the process there?
That's a really good question, because you've narrowed down a lot of my influences in terms of genre, and that's because you've done your homework. You've read what I've read, and you've gotten the good parts out of it. What ethnography has done successfully and where it has failed its subjects, and as a writer, I like to, I don't know if you saw, how old are you?
36.
Okay. I don't know if you saw the telenovela La Usurpadora.
Maybe not.
It was about twins. And it was just like, I feel like it was like the precursor to my interest in drag and then drag queens, where it's like you wake up and it's like you look in the mirror and you're a stranger to yourself, and then you disappear and you're like this person, and then you disappear and you're this person. And I wanted to keep doing that to my readers, to first of all, you want to guide them by the hand with your voice. I have moral integrity, and you can trust me, and I will take you through this book, and some parts will be hard and some parts will be beautiful, but I'm not leaving. I know these people, I know this community, and I know these feelings, and I'm not abandoning you to them. But I'm going to put on some different wigs throughout the experience, and I'm going to dye my hair, and I'm going to drop by some nail salons and get some different acrylics, and like, and that's part of the experience. It's like, it's a bit of a drag show. And I think that's what makes the book so so visceral for people, where they're like, this was just a devastating scene, and now we've moved on to, I think this where they're like, I just read a devastating scene. I'm gonna pause and let him stop. Okay, so I think people would be like, I just read a devastating scene, and then they read something else and they're like, this is based on reporting, and I can look at the footnotes and see that it's based on reporting, but it feels like performance art. And I felt it was important to create a genre that was new and that combined all of these elements that made me feel different things, because I was an undocumented kid writing about undocumented people at the start of the Trump administration. It was scary. I mean, people were stopping undocumented people on Greyhound buses. They were doing like raids during the middle of the day. My father was experiencing job insecurity in ways that had never happened to him before. And it was a really scary time. And I thought, typically in literature and Western canon, and when seismic things happen, like literature changes. It's like the deep state of the literati get together and they're like, let's try modernism, And I felt like no one had decided in Latinx literature that we were going to do something different. Like people were still like writing about Gloria Anzaldúa. And I was like, this man won a presidential campaign based on calling us animals. And so I just decided to just throw it all into the air. And I pour out every single innard in this book. It's devastating. It destroyed my mental health. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't a drag show, And I think that's what has helped a lot of my readers connect to their own feelings and begin conversations and begin healing journeys.
I love that, and there's so many great themes within your book that I would love to chat more about. One of them, and you say that so well, right? Like almost like the queering of this genre, right? Like the way that you wrote it in a way to keep us, the readers, engaged, even if there was like really hard moments, and there were, right? There's a clear theme of suffering in the book. But you chose to write about suffering. Even suffering seemed so weirdly engaging, right? But not in this kind of bastardizing, not in this like romanticizing of immigrant suffering, but in a unique way. It's because it's easy to kind of fetishize suffering, but you don't do that. Why you chose that approach is interesting to me. So can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe some of the examples that you write about kind of suffering in the book? There are plenty, obviously.
A lot goes into my like sort of like my ethics of representation around suffering. Part of it is that part of it is influenced by my partner, Talia Zamak-Burson, who is an academic and has done a lot of work on tourism. And I've learned from her research, when I can understand it, because she's a theory head, is, sometimes Europeans or white Americans go to places in developing countries in the third world And they really want to go see like the shanty towns. They really want to go see like the slums. And if they'll see a person who's dressed like in Western clothing or something, they don't want a picture of that, even though that's authentic. Like they want to see the person who has like the 5 kids on top of them and like crying. And they'll take a picture of them crying. And they will take that picture and they'll hang it on their fridge, because that is like a memento of an authentic experience that changed their life. So I know about that. And um I I my mom really loved Princess Diana. And I remember just learning about the way that she was really sensitive, and the way the paparazzi would prod her with hateful things and hurtful things in order to get her to cry, because then they could get the photograph. And I also know that our communities, like in the hood, are very accustomed to journalists and to academics coming in, taking our stories, and frankly, people who look like us, um, taking advantage of the fact that they look and talk like us to build intimacy, and not explaining what's going to happen with the stories and how that they can go viral, that they can, be disseminated. And you reveal things that maybe be unsafe. And and that's unethical, and it hurts your community. And I think that there's a lot of people who do that work, and they don't have to go back to the community and look at their neighbors in the eye and be like, I did right by you, you know? And so I grew up with all of these things in my mind where these are my people, like this is my mom and dad, this is my uncle, these are people who make meals for me when I am sick and can't eat other food. Um, these are people who get sick with COVID and they have nobody else to call but me. And I have to find a way to get like a thermometer to them with like overnight. I had to choose a way to represent their suffering where citizens could not gawk at it, and where there was no way that they could look at it and feel inspired by them, or feel blessed in their own lives, or feel sorry for us, or be like, well, they made the choice to come here. Like I sort of made a mental list of all of the effective responses they could possibly fucking have to like the typical immigration stories, the way that they are told. And I said, how am I going to tell that with like the story so that they can't respond that way? Mm-hmm. And I think I did it because when I was going around, I think most of my readers are people of color. I think they're mostly immigrants or children of immigrants, not just Latinx, but like Asian, African, Southeast Asian. And I don't think I have a ton of white readers. And it didn't end up being like the Oprah's book club white ladies who found my stories inspirational. And, when my books started going out at first, people would tell me, white readers who are used to those like inspirational kinds of books would tell me that they felt like they'd been hit by a bus, and that they'd feel like they'd had to take to bed for a couple of days because they felt like they'd been struck by a fever. And I was like, that's right.
Good. I mean, it's kind of inspirational and sobering to kind of hear you talk about a writing process that kind of, it's so involved, and you have like an outcome or a picture in your head of what you want the book to do, and you do that. I mean, I think one of the stories like Ubaldo's story, right? Which is right. So the picture that I got in my head, I was like, oh, it's kind of intense, but at the same time, you kind of just like, but this is in a weird way normal, but it shouldn't be, right? Like it shouldn't be. And he left me just kind of pondering like that. And I it's a really strong. I really appreciate that style of writing. Um, in your book, you talk a lot about, especially in the beginning, you talk about translation, and it's connected to what you just said about the ethics that you kind of abide by in building kind of this community that allow to for you to share their story. Tell us a little bit more about your idea, how you saw translation as an important aspect of maybe building those relationships and maintaining those relationships, because they seem, right, the way that you write about your relationships with the participants, they it seems like you're so bonded. It seems like you just described it, right? Like they are in a way very close to you, relatable to you. They still follow up, they still connected to you. um, and you to them, maybe. So in a way, you build this really amazing community out of this. Um, but translation has a lot to do with it, and the way that you narrate their story has a lot to do with translation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I guess I mean, it has to do with my Spanish speaking abilities, which are you know, which I think are familiar to them because I don't sound like a Latin American. I came here when I was like about to turn 5, and I am very fluent in Spanish. I would, I guess if I took a fluency test, I would be like a native speaker. But I grew up in New York, around Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and, African Americans and Hondurans and watching like Thalia on like soap operas. Like, what's my Spanish? Like, like I know the word for printer in Spanish, but I don't know a single Latino person who doesn't say printer. You know what I mean? So like I know that that Spanish is legitimate, and that's how I talk to my subjects. And sometimes I will like make up words that feel right to me, and I say it with confidence because it's fine to make up words, and my subjects are comfortable with it because a lot of them have kids, a lot of them have grandkids, a lot of them are in communities where they're like organized by dreamers or like second generation kids who speak like me. Like, it's not like people are like, well, how do you acknowledge your privilege when talking to these day laborers? And I'm like we're in their families. They've been known me, they're like they're telling me that they're like, girl, once you get your green card, when you go back to Ecuador, they're gonna stiff you because they're gonna be like, you're a tourist, and they're gonna be like, look at this indigenous artifact, and they're gonna charge you $100 for it, and you're a nice girl, so you're gonna pay for it. So like, I'm gonna take you there. Like they just like, that is our dynamic, and it's real, and it's like, and I mean, it is what it is. I remind them of family. I remind them of their family members who speak a fluent, regionally bizarre. When I do this treatment for my treatment resistance depression called with ketamine, which is experimental, and it's run by a psychiatrist, but like you go completely under, and it's you're supposed to hallucinate, or I just completely lose consciousness. But sometimes I like narrate what I'm seeing, and I always yell out Boricua, and it's like, I'm Ecuadorian, and I grew up in a diverse, as in like everyone was there, but like largely Eastern European neighborhood. but like the influence of Puerto Ricans in my life growing up, I just scream out Boricua every time. It's like, and the influence of Puerto Rican Spanish in our Spanish and like the day labor Spanish, like it's just, and so much of this is like New York specific, but they trust me because I don't sound like a fucking Spaniard. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. And you just brought up something about mental health and your own mental health. And you write about, that's another theme in the book, that it's clearly there. And I want to ask you, if it's okay with you, ask you a question about mental health. There's still a lot of stigma around it, not only in the Latino community and Latinx community about mental health, but in general, I would say that there is still, it's less than before, but it's still there. So when you write about it, and you write it very openly, there potentially can be a way to kind of stigmatize Latinx people about, look, those nut jobs. This is what the problem is, right? So I wonder how you kind of push back against that narrative, right? You writing so openly about the need for mental health to be available and the importance of acknowledging the mental health struggles that many undocumented folks go through. So yeah, that's kind of the question.
Well, I don't push back against anything. So that's like one of my positions. There are plenty of good Latinos who I trust and who are very well spoken and who own blazers and are well paid to, or maybe not well paid, not as well paid as they should be for sure, who do push back on beliefs that people have that are xenophobic, and I don't do that. I just make art. So I also am someone who makes art as a mentally ill person, and it's something that I can't separate from my art. And I am in the very fortunate position to be employed in a field where I can be eccentric. And if I worked in, and I can take days off if I have a migraine that's brought upon by PTSD, which happens very frequently. And I have the medication for it, and I see a neurologist. And I can take the afternoon off if I have a PTSD reaction to a trigger and I like literally get a low grade fever. And I know that there are undocumented people or other immigrants or other low paid, not minimum wage earning Latinx people or Black people who don't have that. They have to work through their migraines. They have to work through their somatic experiences of trauma. And if I don't speak up about the effects of trauma and mental illness on our bodies and our abilities to do work as someone who has a platform and who can be seen and like who is successful and who people are listening to, and like when I am not doing well, I'm not doing Instagram lives where I'm like on the floor, like pouring wine on myself. I just check out of social media. I'm responsible about my advocacy. And so I think it's important for people to see a high functioning, successful, beautiful, an honest person who says, this takes fucking hard work. And also, migration has long-term impacts on our mental health. This is not our parents' fault. This is not our fault. This is a system. And if we want to make certain demands, the demands are not only amnesty. The demands are also, putting our support behind healthcare that includes mental health support for disadvantaged communities, that includes trauma-informed care that is in our languages, and that's on a sliding scale basis. and I'm in the ability to do this, because if I was screaming this from the window of a psych hospital, nobody would be listening. But I have to do this, and so many people have reached out to me being like, I have depression, I have anxiety, I have borderline personality too, but I'm too scared to come out um, and I understand, because I know that I'm lucky, because I'm an artist, and I can write about it, and I can tell the story in my own words. But of course, there's a stigma about it. There's nobody out as BPD other than me and Pete Davidson, you know. But I plan on that changing during my lifetime, and I plan on fighting for mental health treatment expanding in our communities.
I love that, and I love that at the beginning of our conversation you said that you want the book to be part of people's healings, the community's healing, and I love that you are blunt about mental health in your own experience, but also in the experience of the people that you talk about in the book. Um, I have two-ish questions, two or three more questions for you. One is about kind of this contrast that you paint in this book. Immigration scholars talk about immigrants' condition of disposability, right? Like they're throwaways, essentially, right? And often in connection to labor. You take a different approach when you write about labor and about migrants' labor. Um, can you talk about why you chose to write about immigrants beyond kind of the labor capacity? You do talk about labor, but you also talk about the way that they're disposable in other ways.
Sorry, I laughed because my dog looked at me and threatened to bark. So I think he feels some kind of way about this question. Yeah, it's because I grew up with my dad as a delivery worker back in the day, back in the old days, when delivery workers were not essential workers. And he worked down in Wall Street, and people would tell him the suits, how they call them, the suits in Rent. They would tell him to take the freight elevator because they didn't want him in the elevator with them because, I don't know, I mean, they were blighting their view of each other's suits. And my father, I've tried to imagine how he felt like going in the freight elevator with the trash and the boxes, with things, with discarded trash. And that sort of thing picks at your soul. And I've seen the effects of that picking at his soul for a long time. And he's alive, but not much left to him. And he's always been called a good worker. And he's really proud of being a good worker. And that's not enough for a man to keep his spirits up. And so I know that. I also know that in this country's history of racism, the ability of Black and brown bodies to do hard work has always been extolled and has always been praised. And that's never stopped. Genocides or, slavery or attempts at extermination in various levels, Native Americans were said to be immune to several illnesses, and then they were discarded. And then African people were said to be impervious to pain, and then they were considered the best workers. And I mean, are we really saying that being a good worker or someone who has a strong body or is willing to do more than other people are willing to do, are we really willing to discuss agency at this level, or compare whether someone has agency or not, or what choice really is? I mean, are we really willing to go that base? I think that what we should discuss are what are the basic necessities that human beings need in order to not fully succumb to despair. You know, I feel like those are my economic beliefs, and I think people need shelter, and I think people need a steady income, and people need food, and people need the ability to not go to work and home and work and home and work and home. And they need the ability to take some time to see themselves in the mirror and recognize that they're people. And so when people try to be respectful and call us undocumented workers, I'm just like, fuck you, you know?
Yeah, I like there's so much of that. Every kind of turn, every turn of the page is kind of this challenge. You challenge this normative way in which we read about immigrant stories, and I, yeah, it's sobering. It's new, and I really appreciate it. Um, I have two questions. One is about I think it's in the chapter about Flint or Cleveland. You say when you're talking to some youth, if I remember the image or like the part, I drank the mobility Kool-Aid. You say in talking about the importance of education, and you say, "quote School got me out. It can get them out too." Can you talk about that? About kind of that educational meritocracy? Um, as a way out for immigrant youth? Is it? Do you see it really as a way out, or do you see it? Do you only see it that way because alternatives for undocumented young people are limited because of their potential disposable conditions or deportable conditions?
I can't change this country, you know, I'd love to. Um, and I'd love to change myself so that I could believe that revolution is possible within my lifetime and that we could overthrow the heteropatriarchy. But while there are brave people who are working on that, I believe my job is to specifically talk to the undocumented youth that I know and tell them to stay in school and excel in school and stay in school for as long as they can because it's a safe space for them. And it's something that's losing its value for sure as the economy changes and the jobs that are becoming valuable changes. I know college degrees are losing their value. You don't have to fucking tell me that. But if you're an undocumented kid, you should fucking stay in school. Like, your chances of surviving are better. Like, think of this as a John Wick movie. You want to make sure you have those little coins that he has in order to survive. You're no John Wick. Get the little coins because you don't know how bad it's going to get. And you might be great at like, it's also ridiculous and hypocritical because I'm a writer and I'm like a working writer. So I'm like, I need to make rent this month. Let me write an essay. Like, I want to encourage undocumented youth to like pursue the arts, but also like, you have to be talented enough to make money doing it, which is not just talent. It's like talent that a capitalist society recognizes is profitable for a corporation. Do you know what that means? I'm talking to the youth right now. So like, and do you know that that means you will have to work like insane hours, and that in order to be creative and to have that kind of output, you will have to treat your body like a machine, and you will destroy your mind and you will destroy your body. Like, do you know that do you know that? Do you know that? Like, and you need a backup plan. I have a backup plan. Like, I have a backup plan. I'm getting my Ph.D. so I could teach. you know, like just be prepared, like be fucking prepared. Like, I know we focus on, I'm just someone who's just like takes great pride in the fact that undocumented people have survived so much, and that we are so wily and we are so clever. And I feel like we're like survivalists. Like, pack your backpacks, pack the tuna cans, pack the bottled water, you know, pack the flashlights. This is America. We were this close to becoming full on fascist. Do you really not want to finish high school? That's what I believe in. And you can at me, but my partner handles my social media account, so you'll be adding her. So,
in connection to the theme of the series, of the Rebuilding the Republic series, America's Future, how do you see the new administration's approach towards immigrants, undocumented or not, and what are your hopes for the future in terms of the treatment of immigrants in the country?
I don't have hopes for governments or institutions or a justice system or a legal system. I have hopes in the people. And, you know, part of this is being South American. I have seen a lot. I mean, my historical eye has seen a lot. And I've seen a lot of wonderful mutual aid work happening during the pandemic. I saw the restaurant industry. I consider myself a child of the restaurant industry and the service industry. And I saw all of my people go out of work during the pandemic. And I saw people step up, not the fucking government. They didn't give a shit. But I saw people step up. I saw people like people from the ground, like people on the street. I saw the street step up, and that inspires me. I've never been someone who's been like an idealistic, starry-eyed activist, but the pandemic has shown me that people are still there for other people. The pandemic has also shown me that people are psychopaths and will not put on a mask and are willing to like kill like so many people just because they're like just because they like feel like it. But like the pandemic has shown me that people are willing to step up and do serious grassroots work and like go door to door and like make sure their neighbors have food and all of that. And I've done some of that work, and my neighbors have done some of that work. And my mom experienced a couple of hate crimes during the pandemic, and the last one was last week. And the next day, I'm usually like, you know, I juggle like 15 projects. Sorry, that was my agent. And I didn't get out of bed, and I texted my friend Kurt, who's Asian American, and we had been talking about the hate crimes against the Asian community and the Asian American community. And I told him what happened to my mom, and I was just like, I'm giving myself 1 hour to stay in bed and be sad, and then I'm getting up. And within 15 minutes, he told me that he had sent a box of donuts, like really extravagant donuts from a place called Donut Crazy, where the donuts are crazy, and a breakfast sandwich. And he said, like, breakfast sandwiches are what we send girls who need to get out of bed. And that love from another child of immigrants, I didn't expect it. He and I are not even that tight, but he wanted to show me love, and he wanted me to get up to write, because my writing could help other people feel less alone. And he helped me feel less alone. And that gave me a lot of faith.
Thank you so much for your time and for discussing so many great things that are in your book.
Thank you.
The book is The Undocumented Americans. It's available for purchase from an indie bookstore via a link on this screen. Thanks so much, Karla Cornejo Villavicencio and Eric Macias. Let me remind you that this and all our author interviews are posted on the Writers Institute's YouTube channel, and you can find them at The Conversation on our website, NewYorkStateWritersInstitute.org. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you wish to support future programming like this, you can make a donation at our website. To our online audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Be well.